What's up, guys? Jared Tebow here. Gonna show you how I fill up my Tekno shocks with oil, bleed them, and set the air when you're using a Tekno bladder. This is a method that I use right now on my Tekno EB and NB 48 2.1 buggies. We'll start with the front shock. Put some oil in. Using JTP shock oil, of course. Fill it up. Not quite to the top. Let's say maybe 5 millimeters from the top. Push it up. Pull it down slow. Normally you'll have a big bubble and the oil level will drop down. When you're pumping your shock to get the oil to push the air out, you don't want to run your piston up through the oil. You need to make sure you keep your piston down inside the oil the whole time. So I'm just pumping it up and down, making sure the oil is staying above the piston. If you get that piston above, you'll just suck a whole bunch of air again. You'll probably squirt yourself in the face with some shock oil, which won't be that cool. So we'll pump that for a while until it seems like, no more air bubbles are coming. Sometimes I'll rotate the piston a little bit, pumping it. That one's pretty good, pretty full of air. These are new shocks. When you do new shocks, kind of the first time oil's going in, sometimes you'll have more air than normal. Now we'll jump into the rear. Again, fill it up, I don't know, about 5 millimeters from the top. Pump it slow that first time. Okay, that one had a huge air bubble. Oil level dropped, so we'll add some more oil. And we'll just pump it. You want to keep the piston inside the oil at all times, or else you'll fill it up with more air. See the air bubbles coming through the holes in the piston. We'll rotate it a little bit. When you do that, you want to let them sit, I would say, at least 5 minutes. Let all the air come up to the top. These ones I've already filled up. They're pretty much ready to go. So now I'm building these shocks with the Tekno bladder. So I want to show you how I build my shocks, bleed them with the bladder. The bleed is more to set the oil level in the shock. And then I'll show you how I set the air pressure in the cap to give the bladder support. So if you run the emulsion, you'll have an O-ring inside your cap. So if you're switching to the bladder, you need to remove the O-ring out of the shock cap. Put the bladder in. Make sure it's seated using, a wrench, just a 1/5. Make sure it's fully seated. Go ahead and do 2 of these. And now I'm going to get my shock. You don't need to fill it all the way to the top because that bladder is going to take up a little bit of the room. So you want it domed down. You don't want to take, not have it filled up enough, because then you're going to have air in there when you try to set the oil level. It's not really going to work. So now I put the cap on, screw it on. What I'm going to look for is this bleeder hole on the side of the cap. I'm going to look through there until I can start seeing the shock body, and I want the shock body about right centered in that bleed hole. And now I'm going to push the shaft up slowly, not too hard. And then I'm going to start twisting the body on. And now you can see oil is coming out of that bleed hole. I'm not putting a ton of pressure here, but keeping it up. And you want to make sure you leave your shock boot on. If you pull your shock boot, if you like reverse your shock boot, pull it down so the shock goes up more, I feel like you don't quite have enough oil. So I'm going to keep turning. As you can see, more oil is coming out. And now it's snugging. I'm still, keeping the shock shaft up, not with a ton of pressure, but making sure it's up all the way. It's snug down tight. Just wipe the oil. Use my shock wrench here. Tighten that cap really tight. And you also want to do that with no bleed screw in the cap. So that right there is going to set the oil level. The oil level is set. This is what I was talking about when some people want to pull the shock boot down to get a little bit more travel. I find that removes a little bit too much oil, but as you can see, the oil level is set perfectly. It doesn't change when you go up. It doesn't get tight. It doesn't suck any air or anything like that. The oil level is set exactly how we want. And now this shock is ready for the pressure to be put into the bladder. So we do it a little differently with this Tekno bladders. We actually use the air in the cap on the back side of the bladder to give it support. So at full shock length, we will go ahead and put that screw in. And you saw what the rebound looked like before that screw was in. When I had the boot down, the shock didn't really rebound much. And now I'll pull the boot down and show you that it now rebounds down. And when you set your bladder like that, it's really cool when you're at the races, if the weather's changing, temperature change, and kind of just day to day, you'll want to reset your air pressure in your cap. And it's super easy. You can do it with your shocks on your car still. If you run the bleeder screw to the inside, you might have to remove it off the shock tower. But basically just at full travel, remove the bleeder screw. Wait a couple seconds. You can pump the shock up if you want to feel like you're doing something, but that's not really doing anything. And then put the screw back in and you've reset your pressure. So one front shock's done. We'll go ahead and do the rear shock as well. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of oil to this. You can see the oil level there. Not all the way to the top. There's about, I don't know, a millimeter or so of the body showing, and then it's concave down a little bit. So we go ahead, we put the cap on, we screw it down, we look through this bleeder hole. You'll see kind of gray or something sometimes if you can see the bladder. And you can see the color change when you hit the shock body. Put it about half right in the middle. Slowly push the shock shaft up. I'm all the way up. I'm going to hold it with my hand, start turning. Now oil is starting to come out. Just turn it nice and slow, keeping some pressure on the shaft. Got it all the way down. Tighten the cap nice and tight. Feels really good, just like the front shock. You'll feel when you have no pressure under there. If you're pumping it like this, it almost has a little bit of like a step feel to it, and that feels normal. You might think that that's going to feel odd, but that's just this bladder actually collapsing a little bit. And when you fill it with the air and you put the bleeder screw in, then you pump it up, that feeling goes away. We can test this one too. Push it up, there's no pressure. As you can see, there's no real rebound. It's going to rebound a little bit just simply because it's a brand new shock build with brand new O-rings and everything's greased up really good. So the shock is at full droop, full length. We go ahead, put that screw in, which sets the air pressure in the cap. Now you will see the shock shaft rebounds down because the air pressure is set in the cap. And when you pump it, that feeling changes where you don't really feel the bladder compressing anymore. And there you go. Super simple, really cool way to use bladder, give you that extra support. And you can keep it really tuned good with just taking out the set screw, putting it back in, and keeping that air pressure how it should be. Hope that helps out, and thanks for watching. That's how I bleed my Tekno shocks and set my air pressure with my Tekno bladder.